My dad was a drug addict, so he was in and out of prison my whole life. I was alone a lot. Yeah, I mean, my childhood was filled with a lot of chaos, trauma, obviously, and kind of just forced myself to grow up kind of quickly. It was definitely survival. Naturally, I just want to run away with me and my baby and my wife and just go somewhere, but I know it can't happen. How is that going to be possible if we bring this baby into this environment that we are so desperately trying to escape ourselves? I pretty much, whatever happened to me as a kid, I'm like, that's what I'm not going to do. My main goal is to just make sure that my girls have, stability and safety, and just to know that I'm not going anywhere. You're not stuck with this family. You're not stuck with repeating these cycles. Just stay curious, and that curiosity will lead you to healing and knowledge that you can get out and use it and get out of there. You can rise above, you can learn, you can grow.
Welcome to Cake for Dinner. This is not your everyday mom podcast. We laugh, we curse, we tell the truth, and we're here to ditch the perfection culture. Today's guest is Tyler Baltierra, someone a lot of us feel like we grew up with. From the early days of Teen Mom to now being a husband and a dad, he's lived a very public life, but there's a lot more beneath the surface. Today, we're going to get there. Tyler Baltierra, welcome to Cake for Dinner Dad Edition.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I love the name, by the way, Cake for Dinner. I got 3 kids, so that's like, sometimes just let's have cake for dinner. I love it.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you quickly, the name really is a nod to my dad, actually. So anytime, my dad's actually a scientist, but he bakes really well. And anytime that my life has gone bad, which I'm sober, so you can imagine it's gone bad a few times, he bakes me cake. So it's kind of his love language to me. So
I love that.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's just get right into it. I think a lot of us know you from the show, right? But I am in the mental health space, so I know that there's always more to the story. Who were you as a kid, and what did home actually feel like for you growing up? So before the show.
Man. Well, as a kid, I was raised by a single mom. My dad was a drug addict, so he was in and out of prison my whole life. So I think growing up, my mom being by herself, I was alone a lot. I mean, this is back in the 90s. So I mean, they would say, hey, make sure you call, check in, dinner's on the stove, that kind of stuff. So I was alone a lot. And the times that my dad would come in and out of my life was pretty chaotic. He wasn't very consistent. So I mean, I was I was I had a lot of behavioral issues as a kid. I was kicked out of all the daycares in the county that my mom would. So I went to 4 different daycares in this little town that we lived in, and I got kicked out of every single one. So I was just really kind of wild and obnoxious. Probably I had a lot of ADHD stuff going on when I was a kid.
Yep.
Probably undiagnosed for a while, but so just a lot of behavioral issues, and it was just kind of a chaotic childhood that I feel like, a part of you have to grow up kind of quickly. You figure it out pretty fast that, I got to make myself dinner. I got to, make sure that my mom's not going crazy. So, I mean, my childhood was filled with a lot of chaos, trauma, obviously, and kind of just forced myself to grow up kind of quickly. So, yeah.
Which is wildly different than how you're parenting, it seems.
Way different. That's kind of why I feel like, I always say how grateful I am for the, just being on MTV and just having that kind of resource that I think a lot of people in my family for generations never got.
Right.
So for me, I mean, I'm parenting completely different. I pretty much, whatever happened to me as a kid, I'm like, that's what I'm not going to do, right? So I feel like with my dad and stuff, not having him around, I had to learn how to be a father, a man myself, and so I think I used his example as something just not to do. I'm gonna do the complete opposite of what he did, and it's worked out pretty well for me. I mean, I got into therapy super young because I knew something about our family just wasn't like. I was like, something's just not normal here. Especially when I got out in the world and started seeing other kids and their families, and I'm like, oh, not every kid deals with this. Like, you know what I mean? So you kind of like learn,
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe I'm like not, maybe my home life isn't normal. uh,
Right.
when you grow up in that kind of environment, you kind of assume that all kids must be going through this stuff. And then you find out quickly that that's not true. So I feel like for me, it was like, all right, how can I raise my kids completely opposite of what I experienced? So that's my goal. I'm going to mess up. I'm a human being. So
We all are.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. But my main goal is to just make sure that my girls have stability and safety, and just to know that I'm not going anywhere. So
Yeah, I love that. That alone will change a ton for them. I think, as you know, I work with teenage girls.
mhm.
Um, I lean heavy on the dads. A lot of times the parents will come in my offices, sometimes together, sometimes not. And I emphasize strongly to the dads that they'll never understand the gravity of their presence and how important their relationship is with their daughter. I mean, it is huge.
Yeah, my
So,
wife actually, she's kind of had a rocky relationship with her dad, and she's the one that told me from the get go. She's like, I don't think you understand how huge, and how important the role of a dad is to the daughter specifically.
she's
And so
so right.
yeah, she
So
was
right.
she was pretty much like, it's huge, and I'm like over here like, well, I don't know how to be a dad, so I never saw a good one, so I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna, go with the flow here.
Well, part of it is trying so hard, right? Showing up, being available, being willing. One of the things that I got, so when I'm going to do a podcast, I generally reach out and let people know who I'm interviewing. And one of the things that a lot of people said about you is that how you seemed so mature, so young in terms of your communication style. And just like it almost seemed like you had therapy always. Like it's like the way you spoke to your own parents and the adults in your life, you seemed like a little adult. And so I got a lot of those comments from people. Where do you think that comes from?
I mean, honestly, I think it comes from just kind of being forced to. I think, like, unfortunately, I feel like, yeah, and that's one of the kind of like the double-edged sword here. You get, you're so mature for your age, and you're so this and that, and it's like, yeah, well, I had to be. So it's
Yeah.
like I'm glad, I'm happy that I had that ability or whatever, but I had to suffer a little bit to get that ability, and so,
Mhm.
it came from just a lot of just observing, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of trauma. Honestly, that's where it came from, and I feel
Yeah.
like people kind of gloss over that a little bit. They're like, oh well, oh, you're so mature and you're so wise and this is so great. And I remember being a kid being like, yeah, I guess, but you're not seeing where it's all coming from. I'm like, yeah, sure. I
Right.
mean, yeah, okay, great. And it's a weird compliment to try to accept when you know where it comes from. It's like, yeah, I appreciate it, but at the same time, I don't think any kid should have had to have gone through what I went through just to get this maturity
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Actually, one of the chapters in my book that's coming out is basically the idea is, can you raise resilient kids in a comfortable world? So you
Interesting.
attribute a lot of your maturity and ability to communicate to trauma. I attribute a lot of my hustle and grit to growing up with no money, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, but we're neither of us are raising kids that way. Our kids
Right.
hopefully don't have trauma. They're not going to be broke, right? So it's like, but can you still raise them? Can they be gritty? Can they be resilient? Can they have good communication skills and be mature? It's an interesting question, right? Because most people that have great shit, when you talk to them about it, they'll say what you said. Yeah, it's great, but it was built like, I had to suffer to get there.
Yeah, which that's actually really interesting because I feel a little bit like, with our kids raising them, I'm like, they don't see us like living a normal, quote unquote normal life. They were raised with cameras around. Our job is very weird. It's not normal. It's not a 9 to 5. They're not seeing mom and dad do this thing, and so have a lot of like anxiety about like how am I going to show these kids that that our specific lifestyle is not really normal. And also, you bring up a good point about like how, like, is it too comfortable? Are they too, like, is there anything,
Yeah.
is it even make sense that they're too safe? Like,
Right.
because the world is scary and a lot of the world isn't safe. And so how do you like balance that? Yeah, that's really interesting. I might have to read that book. Yeah.
It actually, during some of my research, one of the things that you can do, which I love, I grew up also doing this, but is just a high focus on giving. So if you look at even wealthy families like the Kennedys, like people that have grown up around tremendous wealth, way more than what I'm providing here, but there was a huge focus on giving back.
Mm.
So that sort of like helps them to shape their view of the world, and also to keep you out of like so much self-focus.
Yeah,
So that's one of the things.
that's good because I took my daughter, my oldest, I took her shopping with us. We set up a food pantry a couple months ago in our local community when all that stuff happened with food stamps and stuff. And so that kind of started it. And she really had, I mean, she was like picking stuff out to like what we should get put in the food pantry. So, and I didn't know that. That's great. That makes me feel a lot better because I feel like we always talk to her about, just that we're very blessed, and with being blessed, we need to, pass it on, pay it forward. So that's good. I'm glad that. Okay, good. I'm doing something right. You know what I mean? So
You're on to it. You're
yeah.
doing it. So looking back at how much do you think your environment, your family dynamics, what you're exposed to, shaped you becoming a teen dad? So in other words, growing up that way, how much do you think that led you down the road?
Honestly, I would probably contribute to that everything because being a child in the environments that I was in, I was sexually abused at a young age. I think that created a hypersexual identity that I was too young to even know what was happening. And
Right.
I think and I was sexually active super young, and so I feel like if anything that trauma really was what caused this to happen because
Right.
it's one of those things where you're growing up by yourself. I'm the only boy in the whole house. My mom and my sister are the only other two there. They didn't talk about puberty. They didn't talk really about safe sex and what that looks like. And I'm over here, you know, kind of just trying to survive and not really know what's going on in my own head when it comes to
Yes.
that stuff. So honestly, I mean it led everything. It led me right to that because unfortunately, me and my wife got together super young, and so that hypersexuality I think is what kind of caused this to happen because we just and her family didn't really teach her either. You know what I mean? Because we're
Right.
both from these kind of wild environments, so it contributed everything to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when I ask you about your childhood, the first thing you said is that you were alone a lot.
Yeah,
And I think that's a huge part of it, right? There's not a ton of education, but also being alone, you're left as a little person to kind of like make sense of the world,
right.
right? With, like I tell my kids every time they leave, you're leaving with no frontal lobe, by the way. So, like,
Right.
call me.
Yeah, yeah.
When you and Kate made the decision to place Carly for adoption, what did that actually feel like in the moment? If you can take us there, did it feel like a clear choice or more like survival?
It was definitely survival. I don't think any of our that choice was never clear. I think to me and Kate because we both would go back and forth during the whole 9 months. I mean, I'd be like, "All right, we have to do this adoption because our families are crazy," and she's like, "Yeah, you're right." And then like a couple months later, I'd be like, "Well, maybe we can do it. I want a parent," and all this stuff, and she was like, "No, my mom's crazy, we can't." I'm like, "All right, fine." And so we went back and forth a lot on our decision, and I think when it came down to it, we it's like I always explain it like it's like you're literally fighting nature because your natural
Yeah.
instinct is to just let's just have the baby. Me and you,
Yep.
we're young. Let's just grab the baby and us three we're just gonna run off and just leave and just run somewhere and hopefully survive. But then when you're looking around at your environment and realizing that that's not possible, we can't just take off and run. We're too young. We have, not even graduated high school. We don't even have a car. We can't even afford cell phones. Like, there's so many things that go into it. So it's like this nature versus logic. Like, naturally, I just want to run away with me and my baby and my wife and just go somewhere, but I know it can't happen. And so it was purely based on survival because me and Kate also knew what kind of parents we wanted to, even though we were young. I mean, we knew what kind of parents we wanted to be, which was nothing like our parents. And so how is that going to be possible if we bring this baby into this environment that we are so desperately trying to escape ourselves? It just didn't make any sense. So yeah, it was definitely based out of survival, and the decision still to this day is it's hard to make clarity of it
Yeah.
because we got so much more resources after she was born, and so it's kind of balancing that where it's like you think you're going to be in this horrible drug addict environment with no resources, but eventually you do grow up and you get out of it, and so it's a decision that I think we're always kind of blurring around and trying to make sense of it.
And do you guys do you feel like you're at peace with it now? Now
Yeah,
that
I
she's
mean,
older, you're older?
peace is a peace. That's a kind of an interesting. Like, I don't know how. I don't know if adoption is something that you're ever fully at peace with. I think it's more of just acceptance, and I think people confuse those two words a lot. And it's not the same. Acceptance, I don't feel peace about it, but I accept it. And so I think it's one of those things when you're a birth parent, you more or less just are forced to accept it. I don't know if any birth parent feels at peace because
Right.
I try to explain it as in like it is the same as grieving a child or a person that's still alive, and that's really a difficult thing to do consistently because death is so final and this is not, so it's being a birth parent is it's a very interesting not a lot of people are. I mean, less than 2% of people are adopted or place their children. So we're kind of on our own here, and it's difficult. I mean, and it continues. And there's a lot of great things about it. I mean, obviously, me and Kate are really happy. It's almost like we're really happy for her. We're happy that she got out. We're happy that she got out of this environment and she's able to be raised completely different. But as far as us personally, it's like, yeah, I mean, we obviously wish things could have been different.
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. Like being at peace is very different than accepting. That
Yeah.
makes so much sense. I appreciate you clarifying that. And also, I mean, look, we only see a little bit of your life on the show, but it looks like from a viewer that you and Kate, you struggled at different times, but it looked like you guys leaned into each other in those moments of questioning it and all the way through the process.
Oh yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? I mean, it's wild to get together that young with two families that are, somewhat dysfunctional. There's addiction present. There's no resources, and you've given a baby up for adoption. It is wild that you guys have stood the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, like I think certain things that you go through with somebody can either like just bring you really close or it can really kind of separate you two. And I think for me and Kate, we were the only ones in our circle that we could lean on and we could actually rely on and feel safe enough to do so. So I think me and Kate, we really just fell into each other because we knew that there's no one else out there. No one else that we know is a birth parent. No one else that we know is trying to rise above their, environment because a lot of our friends
Right.
and peers, they stayed in the same thing. And a lot of them are, still doing that same stuff. So, I think me and Kate, we just kind of, it brought us closer. And I think people, they throw around this term trauma bond all the time. And I have such like a weird like I'm like where did this? First off, I think a lot of people like to throw around mental health terms like they like they know what they're talking about. But yeah, I think me and Kate did bond over this trauma and traumatic experience. I'm confused on why people think that's such a bad thing because when I think about it,
Yeah.
like who you talk to anyone who's been in a long term relationship or been married for 40 years and you ask them, I'm pretty sure they went through trauma together and that
Yeah.
trauma bonded them together. I mean,
Honesty. Yeah.
it comes to a point where people are confusing that term and thinking that it's this like
Well, it's
horrible
given sort of a negative
yeah,
connotation, right?
yeah.
Um, this is a little off, and I don't have this in my notes, but I do work with the troubled youth, and
Mhm.
so many of them come from dysfunctional homes and are often hopeless as a result of that and what their future looks like. What would you say to someone, a 15 or 16-year-old that comes from a tough home, doesn't have much love or support, and doesn't see much of a future for themselves?
Honestly, I would say to remain consistent in the curiosity of where you come from, how you are the way you are, and knowing that with that curiosity you're going to learn things and that knowledge is going to get you out if you apply it the right
Mm,
way. So I think for me, I always tell people to stay curious about healing, and healing looks different for everyone. But if you stay curious about it, you get more knowledge, and then you can apply that knowledge, and you can use it in a way that benefits you instead of just repeating the same cycle that you're stuck in. And so I feel like honestly, just stay curious about evolving as a human and just like realizing that you're not stuck here. You're not stuck with this family. You're not stuck with repeating these cycles. And you're allowed to heal and also have a relationship with these people that you love, like your mom or your dad or whoever you're being raised with. It's I mean, I'm really close with my dad still, and he's still a hardcore user. And but with my curiosity of figuring out how I operate the way I operate, and then the healing that comes with that, I'm able to have the boundaries with my dad. So I'm able to still have a relationship with him that's safe enough for me. And so there's a balance there. I think for young
yes.
kids, just stay curious, and that curiosity will lead you to healing and knowledge that you can get out and use it and get out of there. So.
What great advice. I mean, if MTV hadn't picked you up, I really think you should be a therapist. I mean, I
Well,
feel
listen,
like
I've had a lot of therapy, so I mean, I don't know how good the victim would do as the as the
I feel like you were using the word boundary at like 15.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, I learned about it pretty early on, and I think people also get that word messed up too, where it's like a boundary is literally just to keep yourself safe. It's not an ultimatum. It's just to keep yourself safe.
That would be a really good book, actually, like because there's so many therapy words to your point or phrases that have a negative connotation that don't necessarily, they could be negative, but
Right.
a boundary could also be super positive,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't have to be negative.
Yeah, I think people
Maybe
use boundary like an ultimatum, and it's like, no, you can't do that. The boundary is not for the other person; it's for you.
right.
So I think people say, "Oh, if you don't get sober, then I'm not gonna have a relationship with you." It's like, yeah, I mean, that's your ultimatum, but my boundary is, hey, I'm gonna remain at a distance that's safe enough for me while you use that doesn't affect me. That's a boundary. So, yeah, I don't know. I think people throw around these mental health terms a lot that are like, it's like, nah, you're
Well,
not using the right way.
they talk about them in the way that they see them through their lens, right? So
Right.
so I think prior to healing, a lot of things look different.
True.
So when you look back at you and Kate during that time, now as an adult and a father, how do you feel about how it all unfolded? So I guess the question is like more towards not just the acceptance of the adoption, but just all of it. Tyler and Kate, just
Mm.
like the whole thing.
I mean, when I look back at our whole like journey, I feel a lot of pride. I think I feel very proud of how far me and Kate have come, and I think that pride only gets bigger in as we get older because I see I see the effects on my children. I see that
Yes.
my children feel safe, and they're able to communicate things with me and Kate that me and Kate never were able to communicate with our parents, and just their it's evident in them, and that kind of stuff is so motivating and so empowering as a parent to see it. And then obviously that makes me and Kate look at each other and we're like, oh look, we actually did it, like we're doing it, like holy crap. And honestly, I just look back and I feel very grateful. I feel very, very, very blessed, and I think that this obviously all happened for a reason, and so I just feel really happy. I'm proud that we got out, of the crazy
Yeah.
chaotic environment that we were, in.
I would guess you're meant to, right? Probably to help other. I always think like I've said so much wild shit in my life that if I don't use it to help other people, then it really doesn't make sense. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like if I'm using it to be of assistance or to help other people, it makes a little more sense. And I think people watching this will get that from you. I think that's part of your appeal to the world is that, you're very good at communicating your feelings. People have watched where you came from. And I think it gives people hope.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would hope so, because I feel like, and I'm not a unique story. There's a lot of stories out there that aren't on TV, that aren't getting covered, and that don't get the recognition. And there's people. I mean, they're doing it. So I think rising above, your environment and growing up and healing and it's not unattainable. Like you can do it. So I mean, honestly, it's been a crazy journey. No one ever thought this was gonna happen. We signed up for 1 hour episode that we thought was gonna be like true life, and it ended up being 16 and pregnant, and then it turned into all this other stuff. So you just never know what the future holds. So keep hope.
What was it from the beginning? So how did they find you, and what was the offer? Like what?
Yeah, so we already were looking at adoption agencies when she was pregnant, and then one of our adoption counselors said, "Hey, Viacom MTV reached out to us. You want to fill out this form?" And I was like, "All right, fine. I'll fill." As a joke, I'm like, "Yeah, I'll fill it out." And I filled it out, and they ended up actually dropping another girl they picked, and then picking me and Kate. I think they were pretty adamant they wanted an adoption story, because I don't know if you remember, but at that time Juno just came out. That movie Juno came out, and so
Yes.
which really heavily inspired 16 and Pregnant and all their graphic design. So they were really looking for a adoption story, and so that's how we got picked. And we honestly didn't even have a name for it. So I was telling people I'm going to be on True Life, and I'm pregnant in high school on True Life or whatever. And so, yeah, no one ever really knew what was going to come out of all this. So,
Was there pressure to stick with the adoption because you'd already signed up to be the couple that was giving the baby up for adoption?
no, we never felt any pressure from like the producers or MTV. I think, honestly, to be honest, I think a lot of the producers, a lot of the adults, were kind of assuming that we were just going to not do it. Even the nurses in the hospital treated Kate pretty not very sympathetic, because I think they assumed after she wanted to hold her that she was going to change her mind, and then obviously the adoptive couple was going to be heartbroken, and so she actually didn't get a lot of sympathy from I think a lot of people, like I said, they thought we were like, they're not going to do this, they're not going to go through with
Yeah.
it. So yeah.
I can't imagine. My heart went out to her then, and it still does. Like that moment, I can't even fathom that. And I imagine thinking about that. What does that do for you? Like, how do you feel when you think about those
Honestly,
moments?
I think at the age that I am now, I look back and it's hard not to get angry a little bit. It's hard not to be like, where were people? Like, I have my own children. I have 3 daughters that I'm raising right now, and so like I can't imagine one of them being in that hospital room, even going through what she went through, and just where was everybody? I get so like how dare they not be there for her in the way that she needed, and not only like our parents, but even just everybody involved, the adoption agency,
The adults.
everybody. Yeah, I mean, honestly, we're listening to all these adults, and you had this poor girl child in crisis, and everyone's just like, I don't. I look back and I'm just like, where was the support? Where was the
Yeah.
support? Where and why? Like, this was so unnecessary. And that's kind of why my position now is more or less like, I just want to prevent every unnecessary adoption,
Yes.
because that's the goal. That should be everyone's goal, right? We shouldn't want more babies to need to be adopted. As a society, we should be like, what's going on? So yeah, I look back now and I'm just like, how I just think of how many people really failed her. And I think about now as a father, and just like, oh, like, her dad didn't even come to the hospital. He didn't really talk to her at all. He was in Florida, and I just think about that a lot. And I'm like, what is? Oh, I just can't wrap my head around it. So, yeah, I look back and I'm like, oh, I get a little like, come on now, where
Yeah.
was everybody?
Yeah, where were the adults? So, are there any specific laws or is anything different now in terms of adoption?
No, no, and
Mm.
there's no. I mean, actually, a lot of adoptees are still fighting for their human right to get their birth certificate and their birth records. I mean, some of that stuff is sealed.
Oh,
So
right.
there's actually still states that adoptees are still fighting for these laws to be passed so they can actually get their original birth certificates. And it's crazy because, it's part of our amendment in the Constitution. We deserve to have that right, to have our own original birth certificate, but yet adoptees don't have that right. So even like, there's a lot of fighting still going on, and no, the laws are not, and there's no, adoption's not legally binding. There's no, like, we can make a plan to have an open adoption, to have visits every year, but none of that's legally binding. So, I think
What does that
adoption.
mean exactly? So you made a plan for it to be an open adoption, right? And then, but that's just like what, an idea? I mean, that's a
I mean,
handshake?
yeah, pretty much what they consider, yeah, kind of like a handshake deal. Like, it's not, there's no legal route to take if this agreement doesn't go the way it's supposed to. So, which, when you're kids, you don't know that. You're listening to every adult around you saying, "Hey, yeah, we'll have visits, you have pictures and all this stuff." And we're like, "Okay, great." And then, you know what I mean? Then you get older, and then they're doing
What
this
age did
stuff.
that change? Like how old was she when that stuff started to change?
I would say probably around when she turned like 5 years old is when they started
Okay.
going. Not every year. We're not gonna have a visit now every year. It's gonna be every other year, and this and that. So, which is actually really common. I think most. I want to say like over 90% of open adoptions close within the first 5 years, and that
Wow.
means completely closed. Like, not even pictures, no letters. Some adoptive families actually move out of state, and they move, like, and then that's their way of kind of like, you'll never find them. So
So the birth parents hold all of the cards in that scenario.
the
I mean, no,
adoptive
the
parents,
adoptive parents hold all the cards in that scenario. The birth parents have no rights at
no.
that point.
Once, and I think people get it confused because when people ask me, they're like, what are the alternatives to adoption? And I say there's a lot of alternatives. There's permanent legal guardianship. There is
Mm.
kinship adoption within a family. There's multiple ways to provide safe external care for children without erasing their identity and without, falsifying birth certificates and stuff like that. So, as far as adoption goes, it's just a legal transfer of parental rights. It doesn't really mean anything other than that. There's ways to go about it where you don't have to sever, the identity and origin of the adoptee, and then also, maintain a little bit of protection for birth parents. So, yeah, adoptions. We have a lot of work to do in this country when it comes to
Are you motivated to be a part of that work? Like, is
oh,
that part
very.
of what you,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I've written multiple different senators and congressmen, and trying to get, even state representatives to try to just listen to me. Have no callback yet, but I'm still gonna I'm still gonna keep writing them. I'm
You
actually
should.
I'm producing a documentary film called "All You Have Is Love," which is all about the adoption industry in this country and how, kind of where it started from and how we got to this point, the supply and demand issue that we have. So yeah, I'm very, very. I advocate for, and it comes down to just the adoptees. That I mean, birth parents. I
Sure.
mean, yeah, I believe we have some. We need we need advocacy too. But these adoptees are the only ones that are forced into this dynamic in this lifestyle without any consent, and and then adoptees get these rights taken away, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, I
And
really.
then they can't reach out until they're 18, right? That's
Right.
basically.
And sometimes, well, like I said, even though when they're 18, they go to reach out and they go to try to find their birth certificate and they're sealed because they're
Right.
not they don't have access to that right. So in a lot of adoptees, I can't tell you how many of them have reached out to me and have said that I was so scared to look for my birth family. I was so nervous to like upset my adoptive parents that I waited till I was 18, and when I went to go look for them, finding out that my birth mother died a week before I turned 18. And
Oh,
so I'm just like, "Oh my, I can't like the double the double layered trauma of that
yeah.
is just insane to me." And a lot of people actually there a study that just came out from Dr. Lynn Zubov. She published a study about the effects that adoptees have from maternal separation trauma, which they obviously can't speak because they're babies. But it does something to the brain, and that's being proven with science. So I think the more we just keep talking about it, instead of wrapping it in this like pretty bow about, oh well, this person can't have a baby, and then you don't want to raise the baby, or you can't raise the baby, so they can't, and so we need to like, which is yeah, there's really great stories of adoption, and I don't want to like take away from that, but the majority is different, and so um yeah, I think we need to start
That's
talking
very
about
much
we gotta
the
start
way.
talking about it in a real way, in a real,
Yes.
the way that it's really actually impacting people and
Well,
families.
and also the truth of it,
Yeah,
right? Like what it looks like scientifically for a child who's adopted or whatever. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It's just
yeah,
some facts aren't given. And that's that happens a lot in history, right? Where we
right,
kind of dress something up to look a little bit better. Do
yeah.
you have a relationship with Carly now? And like how do you see that going in the future as she gets older?
As far as a relationship goes, we don't really have. I mean, I set up an email for her that me and Kate will write to, and that's pretty much the only way that we're kind of like maintaining any kind of communication. After her parents closed the adoption, we figured, hey, if we set up an email for her and write to it, and then one day, if she ever wants it, we can give her the login and the password, and she can kind of just go through the email herself. And so that's pretty much the only way we have of
So you just
communication.
randomly go on and sort of write your feelings or
Yeah, if I'm thinking about her that day, and it can be short or long, I'll kind of send pictures of her sisters in the email and stuff to keep her updated, because that was the promise that we made when we relinquished her. We said, we're gonna make sure that we let her know that she's not just forgotten about, or whatever. So but as far as like communication goes, or as far as relationship goes, that's in Carly's, that's up to her. I think me and Kate, like I said, we've accepted the fact that she might get older and not want anything to do with us. She might be like, what, the whole TV thing, everything, she might not even like us, and which is okay. That's fine, because as a birth parent, my duty is to be there to answer the questions that she has as an adoptee. I think she is
Mhm.
owed that. I think she's deserved, she deserves to have those things, because like I said, she's the only one that's affected the most, and also had no consent
Yeah.
into this at all. So um my feeling is that, if she comes to us one day, my job is to bow my head, fold my hands behind my back, and agree with her, and just tell her that I love her, and say, I'm sorry, I love you, regardless of what she has to say. So, I mean, it's one of those things where some adoptees have really horrible reunion stories. They find their birth families and they go, oof, like, no way, like, I don't want anything to do with that, that's valid. So I feel like, just giving her the space, giving her the space that feels safe, that freedom
Yeah.
and autonomy to kind of dictate how she wants this to work, is super important.
How does it impact your girls at home?
Well, that's a whole other thing, right? I mean, I feel like people don't talk about the siblings. I mean, adoptees, usually if they have no relationship with the birth family, they always have some kind of connection with the siblings because that's their peers. That's the closest kind of thing
Yes.
that they can have. And so it's usually really important for them to have that connection. And so when it comes to raising my girls at home and explaining to them, I mean, we have pictures of Carly in our house. I mean, I refuse to just bury her. I will not do that. And so I think that's a huge disservice not only to Carly, but it's a huge disservice to my girls because they,
That's their sister.
that's your
Yeah.
sister. And so, um, Nova obviously is the oldest, so she has the most memories, and so she's the one that kind of talks about it the most and says that she misses her and she wants to see her and stuff. And all I say is that when she can, I hope maybe she will. And I don't want to build up too much hope for her in the case that Carly wants something to do with her sisters. I don't think that's gonna happen, but it could. And so
Hmm.
my thing is that I just kind of treat it as a grief and loss thing, as much as I can with
Yes.
kids. It's like it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this is really sad. This is hard. This is what grieving looks like,
Right.
and I just kind of keep using that template
Yeah. Well,
as
what a good example for them, right? Because life is full of very difficult things. And so being open and honest about it, I mean, has to be the answer,
it's
you
the only
know?
way in my head that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like the only way I will not shy away from it, and I feel like, and she knows that Nova is she's very wise and pretty smart, and she knows that, like, our family life wasn't the best. So,
Yes.
and she knows that, like, and I always make sure to tell her that even though you see mom and dad upset and crying, Carly's got a great life, and she's got everything that we wanted for her. And so we can feel two things at the same time. We can feel
Yes.
sad for ourselves, and we can feel really happy for her. And so let's just kind of focus on that. And so I try to just kind of lead with that as much as I can.
That's That's also a really good, it's another thing I do with my teenagers is we go around the room and we give two feelings. And the idea is that you can have two feelings
Hmm.
because they think they're locked and loaded with
Right.
like, I'm mad today. Okay, well, you can also be mad and maybe you're hopeful about something or grateful. So I love that. The other thing I wanted to say is my husband met his biological brother when my husband was 18. His brother is, I think, 10 years older, was given up for adoption by his mom, and a similar scenario, and then later had my husband. Greg is the brother. He called my husband. My husband was 18 years old and got a phone call and said, "I'm your brother." And to this day, they are super close. They're
Oh,
spend
wow.
holidays with them. That is my husband's family. Like I mean, that's his family. So that's a great outcome to a similar story. So that's another reason it's like touched my heart and his heart, this story. So I think there are so many opportunities for it to go amazing. But your perspective on it is just so refreshing and mature and like because at the end of the day, I think it has to be about her, right? Or Nova or your other girls. It has to be about them.
Right.
And you just do such a great job of keeping the focus on them.
Yeah, I mean, I try. Like I said, this is the first time living this life too, so I don't know what the hell I'm doing either. But I just try to,
None of us do.
yeah, I just try to do my best. And like I said, adoption's just a very complex, nuanced thing that, yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that your husband got to do that because a lot of, a lot of people do the ancestry DNA thing, and they see
Yeah.
a connection, and then no one's reaching out, and so the adoptee kind of feels like, oh, like what's going on? So, the fact that you know,
I think he hired a his brother, I think, don't
oh,
quote me on this, but I think he hired a private investigator because when he looked at the original records, stuff was, but I also think it was like whited out. Like, remember
yes,
whiteout?
hmm,
Like, you could take that
yep,
off. So, um, yeah, it turned out to be great. But they will sometimes talk now about, like, you know, who had worse trauma, because my husband grew up in a dysfunctional home with a dysfunctional mom, a drug addict, mental health struggles. So he was raised that way. His brother was raised by a great family with resources and such, but they both have some forms of abandonment, right? So it's like, there's just so many nuances with adoption, and there's so many stories and so many people who have their version,
Mm-hmm.
so I just think it's important to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, do you think parents truly understand what they're agreeing to when they choose adoption? We've kind of covered this, I guess, especially when it comes to things like access, control later on. I would assume your answer is no.
No, yeah, definitely not. I think some adoption places are getting more aware that other people are becoming aware of this, so they're trying to like be more transparent, but definitely not. No, unfortunately.
Yeah. How do you think being on reality TV impacted the experience, for better or worse?
I think the experience of it being on TV has helped in the way of not a lot of people get the opportunity to self-reflect in real time. And
Sure.
so being able to like watch yourself and think, oh wow, I was really angry there. Oh wow, that obviously was really triggering or whatever. That's been beneficial, and also having the kind of the track record, there is also good. I would say the negative would be to just have that vulnerability cemented in digital history forever. So I think people don't understand that. Like from the I've been on TV since 16 to now 34. And when you think about someone who's not been on TV, how many mistakes have you made between
Oh,
that span of time? And so, like, everyone has made these mistakes, some big, some small, but not everyone has had it digitally stored in history forever. So, like, I have to live with the fact that I've made multiple mistakes growing up on TV for the past 17 years that are never going to go away. And so, that's kind of the negative part of it. Is like, dang, like that's not going nowhere. I can't put
yeah.
that in a memory box and never say that it ever happened, because it's out there.
Yeah.
So I think like that part is probably the negative part. But I always say that I'm grateful that I have all my children's births on camera. I have them growing up as kids. Like, I think we live in a day now where our phones are in our pockets and we have cameras and stuff. But back in the day we had camcorders, and like those
Yes.
simple videos that you watch now as an adult, like people still recorded even when they thought it might have been boring. And nowadays we're like, oh, the action's over, we stop the record button. But like having that on TV where it's like just the simple dumb stuff that happens when you're raising kids, that I'm really grateful to have that
Yeah. And
forever.
also just like your relationship with your dad, and like, me as an adult, right? I have the memories I have, but your stuff is like, you can watch it,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, honestly, and also it creates a little bit more of transparency for my own kids, because I can tell my
sure.
kids that my life was like this, or your grandpa was like that, or whatever, but they were able to really see it in real time. So I
Yes.
think that's going to actually help my children better understand their parents and what they went through.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, how do you think we should be talking to teenagers about sex and responsibility in a way that actually lands? Because everybody's heard, the old, this is your brain on drugs, or just say no, right? What do you think actually lands with teenagers in terms of sex?
I think just truth and transparency and just being honest
Mhm.
about it, and letting them know that unfortunately, I feel like kids nowadays. I feel bad for kids nowadays. I couldn't imagine like they have this unlimited access to so much stuff in their pockets every day that I couldn't imagine of what that would have been like as a child developing brain to
Yes.
have this much information. So I think for one, the first thing to do is talk about pornography, talk about how it's not real life, talk about how this is all produced and this isn't real, and that's not what a healthy sex life looks like, for one. And because that's usually these kids are getting introduced to this super early on, and what they're
Yes.
being introduced to is like not real life. And so when they're creating their own sexual identity, they're going off of what they're seeing on these sites, and it's like I think the first thing is like that's the same thing as a movie, right? Like you watch a scary movie when they're a kid, and you're like, oh, that's not real, right? Like this is the same way, like it's not real, so don't get, I don't want you to fixate on that. And also, I think just being transparent with kids and giving them resources, like telling them, I don't know why, I think it should be like a law. Every high school should have a guidance counselor office where they could go get contraceptives and be able to just be honest with someone, and also for the parents to open up the conversation as early as possible with the level of understanding that these kids have. Like my daughter first talked to me about it because she brought it up to me when she was playing this horse game, and she's like, what does mating mean? Because you have to click on the horse in the game to like mate with another horse to get a baby horse.
Yeah.
And that was, she was super young, and we just said, oh, that's mating, and she's like, okay. And then, it moved on. And then, so I think, and then teaching children about the body. The body is nothing to be ashamed of. This is what it is. So I think almost like, teaching the kids from a biological perspective, right? Like the body,
Yep.
the human anatomy, right? And you just kind of like, let the bricks fall where they may. And then I think allowing the children to drive the curiosity to have the conversations is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think instead of shying away from it, accept the fact that this is actually happening and kids are having sex, and that's just how it is. I mean, they're 13, 14, and it's what's going on. And yeah, I also think getting rid of the shame and the stigma that comes around, and I see this a lot more with heavily religious upbringings, that they're being shamed about stuff, and it's like, no, we can't if a child is developing a sexual identity with shame attached to it, they're never going to have a healthy adult sex life. So and they're also not going to know about how to have it in a safe, good way. So I think just being honest with kids, they're not stupid. I think kids are pretty smart, and they're
Yeah,
pretty
and
doing it.
they always know more than you think. When my kids were pretty young, I used to tell them, if you're not comfortable asking me something, then put it on a piece of paper and slip it under my door and I'll write you back. And I can tell you some serious questions came underneath that door
That's
when
great.
sex got introduced. But I was grateful they had somebody to ask, because what I noticed is when sixth grade hits, a lot of shit happens at the lunch table.
Yep.
And you come home, and if you can't come home and ask your parents what these things are, likely now you're going to Google it, right? And then that takes you to a whole new world. So that worked really well with at least my son. He had questions, he'd slip them under the door, and
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you create a safe space for them to have these
yeah,
conversations with, and I think that's the biggest part, is that make the environment safe enough for your kids to not hide things from you and talk to you about it. And I think, yeah, I
and
think
you have
sometimes,
different kids.
yeah,
My daughter would just shoot it out in the car like all wild. You know what I mean? Just asking crazy shit. My son couldn't even look me in the eye. So I had to create a
right.
space for him that was very different.
Yeah, so kind of customize it to the child. Yeah, I mean that's the
Yes.
best way to do it. But definitely not attaching shame to it is the biggest thing. Cause I just feel so bad. Like I said, I feel bad for the kids nowadays because they're at the lunch table, and like you said, they go to Google, and it's like, no,
Yes.
like, oh,
Yeah.
God, I mean,
Oh,
yeah, like, no, like, oh, because what you're finding on Google is gonna be, oh yeah. So just
yeah.
make a space enough that is safe for the kids to come talk to you.
Yeah, I love that. And Teen Dad. What are you really intentional about? Well, this is kind of a funny one. Intentional about doing differently with your kids? I guess almost everything, if we go back to the beginning of the conversation. Is there anything really that you focus on?
I think one thing that I focus on a lot is kind of going into their world, and I use that world to my advantage when I can. Like I'll play Barbies with my middle one, and she'll say stuff like, something will happen with the Barbies, for instance, like, oh, I hit her, and I'm like, oh, that's so sad, or, oh, maybe give her a hug, say you're sorry. Like, I try to just get into their world wherever they're at. I mean,
Yes.
and just kind of use, because I think as adults we get so caught up in like, oh, this is the world we're living in, but it's like, if you can remember as a kid, it's so different. The world you're living in is
Yeah.
so different from the one your parents are living in. So I try to like take myself out of it and go into theirs, and then try to like um, implement it that way. Any lessons that I can. Um, but I
It's
think,
basically play therapy. I mean,
I
that's
mean, yeah,
so
yeah, in a way,
so
yeah.
it's so effective, right? Because like also sometimes parents have these like huge expectations of kids because we're so far from being a kid. Like we forget like what that was like, what that felt like. So I love that idea.
Yeah, and
I
honestly,
mean, it,
with girls, the Barbies makes it really easy. So if any
yes.
girl dads out there, or yeah, use the Barbies, man.
Yeah, yeah, use whatever you
Yeah,
can,
right,
right?
right, yeah.
What are you really, or when you think about everything you've lived through, what do you hope for your kids and other young people watching to take from your story? So when people watch your story, because Tyler, I have to tell you, I've never gotten so many comments about I posted you on my Instagram that I was
Yeah.
having you on. I mean, these are like middle-aged women that were more excited about you coming on than like all these menopause experts I have and doctors. So people
Wow.
have really followed your story. So people are still definitely watching that. What do you hope to impart on your viewers?
I mean, I just would, I just that there's hope in everything. You can rise above. You can learn. You can grow. You're not stuck. I hope that's the message, and I hope that
Yeah.
and just to treat life as a gift. It's such an awesome gift to be able to do this and be able to observe yourself and learn and grow. Like I always tell everyone, like, listen, if you're not evolving, you're losing. And so, I mean, my goal is to learn something until the day I die. Like that's the whole goal. So, stay humble and stay, stay curious. My whole thing is just be curious. I mean, I think curiosity drives everything. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I hopefully viewers will be like, all right, I'm gonna be curious about that and dive into it. I see a lot of people avoiding stuff because they're scared, and yeah, but stay curious and just go for it.
Stay curious is a good one.
Yeah.
You're a special guy, Tyler. You really are. I mean, I think, yes, I'm sure some of it came because you had to, but I also think some of this curiosity and, just sort of your thoughtfulness about the way of the world is innate in you. And I'm grateful that you came on to share it because I think it's super, super important that people see people when they get to the other side, and are willing to be honest about the journey. So if people watched this episode and think that they need more of Tyler, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, my name on social media is Tyler Baltierra MTV. Everywhere. I'm mostly active on Instagram and mostly on our Caitlin and Tyler's fan page on Facebook, which we run ourselves. So yeah, they can. Our podcast, Kate and Ty Break It Down, airs every Wednesday. We talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, go check it out.
Awesome. Well, if you haven't done so, please download and subscribe to Cake for Dinner. We're on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And thank you so much, Tyler, for coming on. This was an awesome start off to Cake for Dinner Dad Edition, and we all appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.